Hello and welcome to this video. I'm Marcus Hayes and today I'm round the garage with Maude, my Mark II Escort MOREDOOR. I haven't really got much planned this weekend when it comes to working on my Escorts, but I do want to quickly jack Maude up and give her a bit of a nut and bolt check just to make sure everything's alright after last week's drift event. If you haven't already done so, do check out the video I made at last week's drifting using the link at the top of the screen now. It was an epic day and I've got the shredded tyres to prove it. Round the garage at the moment, there's a bit of a blast from the past in terms of my own classic Ford ownership in the shape of this Mk1 Fiesta, which before I put Maude on the road was actually my daily. It now belongs to my mate Fred and I'm going to be talking more about this car later on in the video. So stay tuned for that. Right now though, I need to get Maude jacked up, and once I've done my nut and bolt check, I'm going to talk about a few things that are related to what I was talking about 2 videos ago, including one thing that I'm really disappointed about. So apart from the nut coming loose that holds the anti-roll bar to one of the track control arms, there's nothing under there that I can see that is anything to worry about. I really should have split pins in there anyway, but it comes apart so often I just never bother putting any in there. There was also a couple of coolant hoses that needed the Jubilee clips tightening up a bit, but again, that's not a massive issue. 2 videos ago, I replaced the gasket on my Maude'S Sump, and I thought the reason it was leaking was maybe because the steering rack was a little bit close to it, and maybe they were coming into contact over bumps. So while I was replacing the sump gasket, I also fitted these spacers in between the cross member and the chassis, which will then increase the gap between the steering rack and the sump. I mentioned that because I'd lowered the cross member and the steering rack, I was going to need to get a longer steering knuckle. Now I thought I had the shorter type of these, and the one that I sold last year was the longer type. I now realise that I actually have the longer type fitted. Now there is a company out there that does an even longer one, so they do 3 sizes in total, but I can't remember what that company is. So if anyone out there knows who does the extra long UJ steering knuckles for a Mark 1 and Mark 2 Escort, please let me know in the comments section of this video. The one I've got here is approximately 90mm between the 2 bolt holes, so I'm probably going to need something that's about 100mm. In that same video, I mentioned my continued problem I've been having with my noisy starter motor, and I tried to rectify it by boring out 2 of the mounting holes, which I thought would give me a little bit of adjustment in terms of how far the pinion on the starter motor is away from the ring gear on the flywheel. The starter motor is still noisy, so I still haven't solved that problem. The starter motor is a little bit quieter than it was before, but it's still making more noise than it should. Maybe I'll solve it one day, but right now I'm not worrying about it because I've got more important things to deal with, and that brings me on to something that I'm really not happy about. Because my sump gasket is leaking oil yet again. Now no one seems to have problems with these Maude'S Sumps except me. Now I don't know whether my torque wrenches need recalibrating or whether I'm just really unlucky, but I've had to replace the sump gasket on this quite a few times since I've had it. It normally lasts like 6 months, but this time it has literally lasted 1 week. Maude'S supplies sumps to the stock cars, which all seem to have no problem. Now, I don't know whether it's because the stock cars replace their engines after every event, which means their gaskets get renewed like once a week, but it's not working for me. You know, I need this gasket to last years and years and years. I can't keep replacing the sump gasket. Now, the problem is that because this is a tin sump, the flange obviously gets distorted when I'm doing it up. But as I say, I always do follow the torque settings that are on the sticker on the side of the sump. This is making me think that maybe I'll be better off with a cast alloy sump from the likes of Retro Ford, Raceline or Dunhill. But after contacting Neil Dunn, he has actually agreed to send me a brand new sump kit, and then once I've swapped it over, I just need to send the old one back to him. You can't say fairer than that, and that is really good customer service. So if you're watching this, Neil, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. So the starter motor and the sump sagas continue. There's no point losing any sleep over it. It is what it is. But if any of you out there have got any experience with the cast alley sumps available from various companies to suit a rear-wheel drive Z-Tech setup, please let me know in the comments section. So with moored back on the ground, it's now time to talk about this Mk1 Fiesta, whose owner has just shown up. This is Fred, who's been in loads of my videos in the past.
Hello YouTube.
I'll leave his Instagram down here. Go and check it out and give him a cheeky follow while you're there as well. So this Mk1 Fiesta is a 1982 1.1L economy that I bought about 8 years ago. And I drove it round for about 5 years as my daily. When I first got it, it was pretty mint. I could see that it had been painted down both sides, but it was a relatively good job. And it was a pretty straight motor. I did have plans to fit a 1600 CROSSFLOW, but when I found out that you can't just throw in any old 1600 CROSSFLOW, and it has to be a front-wheel drive 1600 CROSSFLOW, which are only fitted to a Mk1 Fiesta XR2, that idea kind of died. When I bought it, it came with Mk3 Fiesta XR2i wheels, which are also fitted to some Mk3 Fiesta gears. And they're a wheel that I don't really like, but they actually did look alright on this car. Yeah, this car never really gave me much grief. I did have a little bit of a coming together with the corner of a tail lift on a Transit, which broke the paint around here and started the rust, which is now obviously a lot worse. I fitted lowering springs to the car. It's actually got 2 sets of front springs from a Mk3 ESCORT. I think the front ones are 2-inch lowered, and I think the rear ones are standard height front Mk3 ESCORT springs. If we look in the bay at the power plant, shortly after I bought the car, I replaced the carburetor for a brand new one. Doesn't look brand new now, but this is the proper replacement Weber for a 1.1 CROSSFLOW. Just a single choke downdraft carburetor. Some people would fit the twin choke, which is suitable for a 1300, but that would have used more fuel and potentially caused a flat spot lower down. I also fitted electronic ignition. Basically, I replaced the whole distributor for one that is electronically controlled. So got rid of the points, which is a lot more reliable, especially on cold mornings. Fitting the electronic ignition does mean that you've got to fit a 12-volt coil rather than the 9-volt one that this would have been fitted with originally, which means you've got to bypass the ballast wire. Also, at some point, I had to replace the gearbox on this car, but I actually got one for free after putting a wanted ad on one of the forums. Someone who had one of these that was converting to an XR2 engine had one going, and he gave it to me for free. At one point, I did have a bit of a system in this car, and I cut the parcel shelf out to fit 6x9s, which in hindsight was probably a silly thing to do because that parcel shelf was pretty mint. So anyway, once I got moored on the road, I decided I was going to sell this car, and then Fred decided that he wanted to take it on, and he hasn't actually done anything with it since. And unfortunately, it has spent quite a lot of that time outside in all weathers. Now, it is looking a bit sorry for itself with the rust coming up in various places. When I sold the car to Fred, it was bubbling up on the sills and on the rear arches and in a few other places where they normally go, but it was minimal bubbling. It probably doesn't need any more replacement panels bought for it than it would have done then. It's just that the rust has taken hold a bit more, so obviously the repair patches will have to be that bit bigger. Let's have a quick look at the interior. Very original. Bit dirty after being sat for the last couple of years. Someone did reverse into me while the car was parked, and she had a tow ball on her car which dented the bumper, broke the number plate. I just replaced the number plate because the dent was actually behind where the number plate goes. I did get hold of another bumper off of another Fiesta that someone was breaking, but I never actually got round to fitting it, but obviously supplied that with the car when I sold it to Fred. Right, so that's a brief history of the car. I think what we're going to do today is give it a little bit of a wash, make it look a little bit better, and then maybe try and get the engine started. So, detailing world, yeah, Fred? Muck off. Right, she's looking a little bit less sorry for herself now. Probably the first wash she's had in, what, 3 years?
Probably, yeah.
Found one hole so far. That one was probably to be expected, to be honest. Yeah, we don't have a battery in the Fiesta at the moment, so to save taking one out of the Mark II, I'm just going to hook it up to Fred's trusty Transit with a set of jump leads. We've had to rob an ignition lead from my dad's Mark III, which I still haven't shown on the channel yet. Fred hasn't brought the fuel cap key with him, so we're just going to use a fuel pipe in the jerry can connected to the mechanical fuel pump and see how that goes. Got the clip off, yeah? There you go. Yeah, I think that one I did with nice size. Just balance that somewhere.
Yeah, we.
Right, so we've got the pipe hooked up to the mechanical fuel pump. Put this end in the jerry can. I did suggest that we whip the spark plugs out and turn it over to make sure we got oil pressure and that, but Fred was like, nah, fuck it. And Fred's already suggested that if all else fails, we can always just throw the jerry can of fuel on the car and set light to it. But hopefully it won't come to that.
So you've got the keys.
Might help. Don't really need keys with these cars, do you? Have I got them?
You did have it last, I think.
No ignition on the dash. Oh yeah, that's in the boot.
Straight off, you might just pop that on there, yeah? Got no tanker in there.
We have no ignition. We have power. I'll let you do the honours. Real mechanic's just shown up.
Out of gear.
Nath. So we now have some sort of life in it. Hang on. Hit the accelerator. No fuel coming out of there. You're going to have to turn it over until the fuel gets in the carb. Got fuel. Fred's just found the petrol cap key. Right, what are we thinking then? Professional mechanic?
I just got it, mate. Carb cleaner.
Carb cleaner?
If you've got some.
Got brake cleaner. What am I doing? Just spraying it in the carb?
Yeah, spray it across it, but try not to do loads. Just do a mist to start with.
There's a good chance that the plugs might not be sparking. Should we check from the coil first?
Well, if you check there, then you know that it's going to be
True.
right, yeah.
Right, we're going to check if we're getting some sort of spark. Nothing. Right, so Fred's just fucked off home for a minute. And me and Nath, proper geniuses,
Good job I turned up, wasn't it?
seem to have got the old Fez running. Try it one more time before you go.
What are you going back for anyway? It's like a rev gauge, mate.
Half? Full. Yeah, economy gauge.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. It's a 1.1L economy, so it comes with like the economy lights on it. I forgot about that actually.
She's a beast.
53 horsepower, man.
Right.
Once upon a time. Go on, go and do what you got to do and we'll carry on playing cars.
We'll go for a drive.
Yeah, yeah. You know what we should do now? What we should have done before we tried starting it? Check if it's got any oil in it.
No, none in there. Bit of black shit on the end of it.
No oil.
No oil.
Oh dear. Nave's doing a bit of digging, searching for hidden rust. It does all look quite solid in there. Yeah, when I sold this car to Fred, I basically just gave him all the spares I had. At one point, I put this K&N filter on it. That's the original airbox. Brand new set of rear brake shoes. This is the rear windscreen washer bottle, which I think attaches underneath this platform in there. Haynes manual, spare coil. Yeah, I did change the radiator on this car once upon a time. This is a genuine Ford radiator. Came up on eBay. But I found that the fan wasn't able to attach to it properly, so I used these cable ties. But then later on, I got this fan off of a breaker, which I think is the correct one that attaches to this type of rad. So I think there was 2 types of rads fitted to these Mk1 Fiestas, and obviously you need the correct fan to go with it. But it's on there securely anyway. Trusty cable ties, can't go wrong. Fred's back. Now that he's found the key for the fuel cap, we're just going to hook up the fuel line back to the fuel pump and then put the fuel in the tank and just check that it still starts. Did you get V-power, yeah?
Nah, mate.
So the Mk1 Fiesta now runs, which hopefully will give Fred the motivation he needs to actually do something with it. Let us know in the comments what you would do if you owned this car. I need to pack up and get out of here now, so I'm going to end this video here. If you thought it was any good, please do give it a thumbs up and a share, and make sure you check out my Facebook and my Instagram, and I'll leave the links you need for that in the description of this video. And make sure you get on Instagram and hassle Fred to force him to pull his finger out. Until next time, from me, Nath and Fred, thanks for watching.